Hello, everyone. Welcome to our GoWP Expert Live series. Today, we are here with Joe Casabona, everybody's friend, favorite podcaster, automation expert. Really excited to be back with him today. So I'm happy to have Joe with us and all of you joining. So if you are watching, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook, or I think we're on LinkedIn and Twitter right now too. So wherever you are, you can say hi in the chat so we can see you're here. I'll be keeping an eye on that during the live stream here. So if you have questions, feel free to shout them out. Today, Joe is going to be talking about how to get yourself on more podcasts. I'm really excited to hear about this because podcasts have been a great way that we have grown our audience here at GoWP and our customer base. So going and making connections at events like WordCamps or conferences and those sorts of things, and meeting people that have podcasts and saying, oh yeah, we'll have you do a webinar with us or have you on our podcast. We'll be on your podcast. You get in front of a new audience within your niche and it can really have a big impact. So I'm excited to hear Joe's tips on that and talk a little bit more about that. But before we jump into it, I just want to say a few words really quick about GoWP in case everyone watching isn't familiar with us. So we like to say that we create happiness for digital agencies and help them to become more profitable. So whether that is joining in these types of calls and live streams or our Friday happiness hour calls that we do, or it's through our services. We have services like website maintenance, content edits, and then also our services to help you grow your team with our dedicated developers, designers, copywriters, and virtual assistants. So if you are in the space of your agency where you're ready to grow, or you've got too much work on your plate and you need some help, that's what GoWP is here for. So we'd love to have that conversation. That's about it. So yeah, Joe, as for Joe Casabona, for those of you who don't know, he's the founder of Podcast Liftoff. He is an absolute gold mine of information on automation and obviously podcasting. So we're really lucky to have him here. So hey, Joe, how are you?
I'm all right, Emily. Thanks for that great introduction. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, I'll go ahead. I can once you get going, I'll just turn my video and sound off, but I'll be here and I'll be watching the comments. So folks, if you're watching, feel free to say hi. And Joe, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. For those who don't know, I have 3 small children, and if you have children, you will know that everyone is sick right now. Um, so I have 2 kids at home with maybe hand, foot, and mouth, maybe strep. You could see one in the background here. So if you have been a long time GoWP member of the Facebook group, you'll know that I've struggled with this from time to time, but if I have to run away from the computer for a minute, you'll know why. Um, until then, I do want to start with some with what a bad pitch is, right? And so I have a graphic here. These are what I call the 9 bad pitch archetypes. And so I have a blog post that I will put in the chat here. Hey, what's up, Trees? Oh, it's in the fridge. Thanks, buddy. My oldest daughter is just like the best. Okay, so, oh, my face is being obstructed. Well, my face is obstructing the GoWP logo, so I'm gonna move it down here. Okay, great. So these are the 9 bad pitch archetypes. I'll run through them really quickly, and I'll give you an example of a good pitch and a bad pitch. And then I will tell you how I manage to do outreach and automate a little bit of it. Now, the main goal here, right? We don't want to automate everything. We want this to be a personalized pitch. However, we also know that most of the information we're sending is generally the same. Okay, so I'm going to run through these really quick. The first bad pitch archetype is the bragger. This is somebody who tells you how great they are and how much of an honor it would be for you to have them on your podcast. The problem here is that while if you become the bragger in a bad pitch, you might make it seem like you are just telling your credentials, right? Why am I qualified to come on the show? There will be an opportunity for that, but what you want to do at first is tell the podcaster what you can do for their audience. So, what value can you bring to their show and for their audience? Do that first, then talk about why you are the right person to do it. Number two is the shameless self promoter. This will be somebody who will reach out asking to go on your show and then say, oh, by the way, it needs to be out by this date because I'm promoting my book or whatever. Um, the the rub here is that my show is not your platform, right? And so if you need to promote something, um, you need to do it tactfully. You need to do it when the host gives you an opportunity to do it, and don't mention it in your pitch. Your pitch should be all about the value. Now, the third one is the ignoramus. This one might affect me more than most people, but or maybe the stray is that. But the ignoramus is someone told them that they need to go on more podcasts, and so they just picked random shows, and they don't know what your show is about, but they know that they've got to be on it. The way to avoid being the ignoramus is by knowing about the show that you're pitching, right? You need to do a little bit of research. You need to know who the target audience is, and you need to know how you can bring value to that audience. Similar to the ignoramus is the stray. This one happens to me a lot because I have podcasts. I have a podcast that is similarly named to at least two other podcasts at this point. Um, one is a big one. So they'll reach out and they will just assume I am that podcast. Even though if you go to my contact page, I make it crystal clear that I'm not that podcast, but they're not paying attention. They're just reaching out to the closest thing, right? I guess for context here, we're all friends here, right? My show is called How I Built It. The show that it gets confused with is How I Built This, the NPR show by Guy Raz. The tiniest chip on my shoulder here will tell you that my show came out about 3 months before their show. And so that's why I didn't change the name of it because I liked it and the domain I have is killer. But people will reach out to me thinking they are that show. I am that show. Because NPR doesn't have like an open call for guests. So, paid promoter we'll get to at the end. That is the middle one for a reason. The brown noser is somebody who thinks that, by the way, avoid being the stray. I'll be right back. Sorry.
No worries, Joe. I'll step in for a minute here. So, as Joe mentioned, he does have both of his kids at home. And I was commiserating with him because I was actually off yesterday sick. So he was correct in saying that everyone who has kids right now has sick kids right now, which is a shame because it's right when the weather's turning and getting nicer here in our area anyway. So I can commiserate with Joe. I get it, and it's totally fine. These things happen, so he will be back shortly. But I'd love to hear if you are watching. I'd love to hear if you're here because you're interested on getting onto more podcasts. What's the reasoning? You know, Joe kind of talked about there. Sometimes people just tell you, hey, you need to go get on more podcasts, or maybe you are getting ready to launch something and you want to promote that to other people's audiences. Feel free to put that in the comments, and we can kind of talk about those, and that'll help inform the talk today a little bit more as well. I do know from experience that being on other people's podcasts can have a powerful effect. But what Joe is saying here is very pertinent, because you'll see, generally speaking, once you start looking to get on other podcasts, there are intake forms with lots of questions, and especially the better podcasts and ones with a established audience, they do tend to vet their guests a bit more, and they're not just looking for folks who are shamelessly self-promoting or any of the other kind of archetypes here that Joe has pointed out. So it is important to have a good strategy when you're going to get onto podcast and know what folks are looking for. So if you are if you have questions about podcasting or getting on a podcast, you can feel free to post those. They will come into us here in Restream. And that would be great. And if you're just tuning in, I am just stepping in for Joe here for a minute, and it looks like he's back. So, and he's got
Hi.
a guest.
Yes. The best laid plans of mice and men. I don't know the end of that saying. I just say the first part, but my boy usually naps at exactly this time, so I thought I could pull it off, but that's all right. The brown noser will rain compliments on you, uh, thinking that's good enough to get on your show. So I think you'll probably see a theme emerging here where the bragger, the shameless self promoter, and then the ignoramus and the stray research and value, right? With the brown noser, instead of complimenting the podcaster, you should be trying to deliver value, right? For the audience. That's what most podcasters want. Then we have the reciprocator. This is somebody who will reach out under the guise of inviting you onto their show, thinking that well, since you were on my show, I can be on your show, right? And the problem with that is that maybe you don't think they're a good fit, right? Or maybe the interview you did with them didn't go so well. So if you want to do a podcast swap, which I'll talk about in a little bit, um be upfront about that. I do podcast swaps all the time, but I never try to blindside the person by saying, well, since you're on my show, I can go on yours, right? The buddy is a friend, right? So this is somebody who knows you personally who's like, I should come on your podcast. But they don't know what they'll talk about. They just know that you know them, and that should be good enough. So if you have a friend who is a podcaster and you want to go on their show, make sure that there's alignment. Make sure you can bring value to the guest. 8 is the copycat. This is somebody who will have heard an episode that is exactly what they want to talk about and pitch the same exact thing. Now, if you are a show that only talks about a very narrow amount of topics, fine, right? Maybe that's good. But if you talk about a number of things, right? I had somebody come on talking about how to grow your email list, and then somebody said, "Hey, I also talk about that. Will you have me on the show?" No, I want a diverse set of topics, right? So if there's an expert in your field on a show and you also want to go on, you need to find a different spin, right? You need to put your own spin on it or find a different niche or talk about a different technique, which means you're going to have to listen to that episode, right? It goes back to the research and the value. Finally, there's the paid promoter. The paid promoter. Now, these are podcast agents who are paid to get their clients on podcasts. A good podcast agent is someone who forges relationships with podcasters by pitching them good guests. They should make less work for you, the podcaster. But the paid promoter, right, the bad podcast agent thinks it's just a numbers game. So they cast a wide net, pitching all of their clients to you and hoping something sticks. Most of you are not going to be a paid promoter, but if you hire somebody to get you on podcasts, make sure that they have relationships with podcasters and they're not. I had somebody saying, I can guarantee you 5 podcasts a month. I said, how can you guarantee that? What relationships do you have with podcasters? And they said, well, we just have a big database of podcasts. I straight up said, I'm not going to pay you to spam podcasters. So those are the 9 archetypes. And those are what to avoid being. Now, if we go back here, I can give you a couple of examples of good versus bad pitches. So let me make sure this looks okay. Great. Oh, I see what I did here. What is that? Okay, great. Let me know if you can. I'll bump this up a couple more, and hopefully you can read that now. If you can't, I can drop a link into the chat. Oh, sorry for the There we go. Okay. So here's a bad pitch, right? This is very close to a real pitch I got, but it's been anonymized. Jim Grandstand is the CEO of Fastball Inc. He graduated top of his class from the University of Albany and holds 3 patents from his technology innovations. Fastball Inc. is the #1 company improving pitching technology and taking it to the next level. Based in Santa Clarita, California, the team lives and breathes baseball. Would you like to have Jim on as a guest to talk about his innovative background and passion for baseball? This is bad because all I know about Jim is how great Jim thinks he is, or how great his pitch person thinks he is. They don't tell me anything about what they'll do for my show, and my show doesn't talk about baseball, right? I love baseball, but I don't talk about baseball. I don't talk about technology either. So this is not the right fit. And they don't tell me what kind of value they're going to bring to the show. Now I try to respond, right? I don't like ghosting people like this. Usually I tell them to apply. But I said like, "Hey, why did you pick my show?" That's a question I like asking a lot because it'll immediately tell me what if they just reached out to every podcast in a certain category. And I just got a very generic answer about how great Jim is. Now, similarly, right, I found out that my specific show is in a database called Muckraker, and it's listed as a technology show where I tell founder stories. That's what it used to be. So the root of a lot of bad pitches I get are just people, again, finding my show in a database and reaching out blindly based on that. If you're going to pitch people, you need to know about the show you're pitching. And and I'll just say, like, I've made these mistakes too. I recently reached out to a podcast that I thought was for kid book authors because I'm trying to reach authors in my niche. And it turns out that it was child book authors reading books to for children to consume. So like the target audience of the podcast was children. If I had read the description more closely, or if I had actually listened to an episode, I would have done that. But I thought based on the information I had, my pitch was good enough. So happens to me too, but I looked like a big dummy and I had to apologize. Now here's what a good pitch looks like. This is great. Hi, Joe. I recently discovered your podcast and became a big fan. Your interviews provide a ton of value and insight into your guests and their process. I especially like the one you did with Stephanie Wells. Her transition from nurse to developer was a great story. I think a guest that can add similar value is Abby Wright. Her journey is incredibly interesting, and her insight will help your audience. A little bit about her, and then in this, right, she's helped over 1,000 small businesses grow as a result and has launched a course to reach even more people, finding the right message for their product or service, right? Thanks so much for your time. I'd love to answer any questions you have or if you're interested, connecting you with Abby. This pitch, to quote Stefan from SNL, this pitch has everything, right? They talk about why they like my show. They mention a specific episode that wasn't just the last episode and why they found it interesting. And then they talk about why they think Abby Wright can bring value. Here's what she does. Here's who she's helped. Here's what she can bring to my audience. Some easy to start methods for finding their own message, and then social proof, right? And then not just do you want a book, right? But like if you have any questions, let me know. This is a great pitch. And I did accept the person. I mean, I guess it's been long enough. The pitch was for Lexi Grant, right? And so she had someone reach out. And it was just like such a great interview, right? Lexi's a great person. I don't know if you know Lexi Grant. But it was a great interview. And the person who reached out is now a friend of mine who I work with a lot because she knows the right people to put on my show. So this is the kind of thing that like a good podcast agent will do. They'll form a relationship. So we've got good and bad pitch examples. If there are any questions at this point, let me know. Otherwise, I will switch to my Airtable view and I'll show you how I manage my outreach a little bit. All right, so let me see if I can. Oh, great. Airtable used to not do this part, so they must have fixed it. But um, okay, so if I go to this is the free one. Spoiler alert, I have this for free. Um, but PR is I think PR Tracker is the one that I'm using. Oh no, it's definitely not. All right, podcast outreach tracker. Okay, so what I have here, right, is this is all in Airtable. You can use Google Sheets or Notion or whatever you're most comfortable with. Um, but here's how I go about pitching myself for podcast swaps or guest or being a guest. Uh, I do a little research, right? I look for shows and then I add them here. I have the contact name. I have some notes. I have a personal note. I know if I want to do a guest swap. So this is the important bit, right? Sometimes I'm pitching just to do a promo swap. Sometimes I'm pitching to be a guest. And then when I click ready to send, an email gets sent out and I'll show you those emails I have, right? So this is in Airtable's. Airtable has a lot of great automations. This is why I love Airtable so much, and this is why my business more or less relies on it, right? So I have two different automations, one to send with a pitch for a guest swap, one to send with no guest swap. So let's look at the guest swap since that's what we're really focused on. And I should say, like, there are multiple ways that you could do like podcast swaps with people. One is a promo swap where the host reads essentially a 30-second ad about your show. But the other is a guest swap where you and a podcaster kind of agree to have each other on the show. You can do the same thing, and I'll show you the PR tracker in a minute, with just pitching yourself. But I have a little bit about me here. I have a personal note, and then if you did want to do a guest swap, I have 4 or 5 different topics. I also have this page where I will be a guest. But the important takeaway here, right, is I look for podcasts to go on, and then I have an automation kick off when I click ready to send that sends the email. The little magical part here is where are we? The personal note, right? So this will just grab whatever I type in to that personal note field and put it here. That way I am sending essentially the same pitch, but I'm including a little bit of information about your show. This method has gotten me to do swaps with 20 to 25 different podcasts. So it's been a really great method for me. I can send a bunch all at the same time. And then, as they come in, I can manage them that way. Similarly, I have this. I mean, this podcast, this base is basically the same. I don't know if I have the automation built in here. I don't. But these are all podcasts that I think I could go on. And then what I'll try to do here is find the email template that I usually send um for a guest swap. Because again, it's really all about the kind of value that you can deliver, right? But as far as finding podcasts, what I recommend, there's a couple of things I recommend doing. And actually, there is a website or there's a blog post I have that let's see. Wish I had this one ready to go. Um, podcast swaps. Yeah. So let's see. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So I will drop this in the chat. So this is more information about podcast swaps, but it also gives you 4 places that you can look to find oh no, this one only gives the one. Sorry. But I go into detail about the power of podcast swaps and guesting, right? Because again, I didn't really cover this, I guess. Um, but the reason that you would want to be a guest on a podcast, right, is that you're inheriting an owned audience or a trusted audience, right? But the fact that the host trusts you um, means that their audience will likely trust you as well. So that's like that's a really big benefit of going on podcasts. You're essentially borrowing audiences. The story I usually tell um, is about Friends. So Friends is one of my favorite shows. Uh, it's like my comfort show. It's the show that I watch when I just want to have something on in the background. Um, but Friends in season 1 was already a fairly popular show. They were averaging around 16 to 18 million views a night, and they were on NBC's legendary Thursday night lineup. Uh, but there is a point in the season, and I'm gonna bring up this chart for you. Yes. There's a point in the season, and I'm just gonna make sure that you can see that. Great. If that looks okay, let me know, Emily. So this is Friends season 1 viewership, right? So you could see, there's some points where they were getting a bunch, but mostly they were around the 18 million range. This green line here is called the one with Chandler's mom, and that was Morgan Fairchild. So that was like their first big guest star. So that was above. Uh, right here, this red bar is the first of 2 episodes called the one with 2 parts. And the reason that this did so well is because they did a big crossover event. They had the stars from Mad About You, right? So they had Helen Hunt wander into the coffee shop Central Perk from Mad About You. Mad About You, if you don't remember, Lisa Kudrow was also on as a forgetful waitress, really a malaised waitress named Ursula Buffet, right? And canonically, Phoebe and Ursula are sisters. So Helen Hunt wanders into Central Perk, sees Phoebe, thinks it's Ursula. That's the crossover. At the end of that episode, Rachel falls and hurts her ankle, and they go to a hospital where they see 2 young, handsome doctors played by George Clooney and Noah Weil, the stars of ER. Now, they aren't playing their ER characters here because ER took place in Chicago, but it was still a crossover event. After that, you can see that they were averaging close to 30 million views per episode, considerably more than their best episode to date because they were borrowing audiences, right? Mad About You was about young 20 somethings trying to make it in the world. Um, ER was also young 20 somethings, professional, trying to make it in the adult world. That's what Friends was about. And so they were able to borrow lookalike audiences. So, in case I haven't convinced you, right, this is what you want to do podcast guests and podcast swaps. It's not necessarily just about growing your podcast, which is usually the frame for this talk, or for the talk I give where that slide came from. It's about growing your authority and your expertise, right? And something I have here in Airtable will do that. Now, again, if you prefer to use Google Sheets, you can track all the same information, and then you can, again, set a column to ready to send and have Zapier or Integromat, well, Make, formerly Integromat, send the email instead. I like using Airtable because it's all in one place. So, let's try to find this. I have an email template for outreach that I'm going to try to find and share with y'all. Um, in the meantime, this is really what I had. So are there any questions about get like finding guests or finding places to be a guest, um how you go about doing the outreach, anything like that? I know that there's like a doing this in the live stream, there's like a 30-second delay, so I'll give it a moment, and while I try to find this email as well. All right. Double check restream. I don't see any questions coming in. So the next thing I'll talk about is 5 places where you can find podcast swaps, um, which I do cover in. Is this the episode I just linked? I don't know if it is, but I will link it here in Restream. So there are 5 places where you can find podcast swaps. Whoops. And okay. So the first one, and I say podcast swaps, but it's like places to find um, guest opportunities as well, right? So um, the first one is Tink Media's podcast promo swap list. I like this because it is a big old Airtable base database of podcasters who have opted into this, right? So one of the nice things is you can filter by opportunity interest and then select guest or interview swaps, right? This tells you that they're looking for guests. And so the contact information is right here. You can filter by niche. You can look through these. And then if you see one you like, you can contact the podcaster, right? So I like this one because it makes finding the information as easy as possible. And it's people that you know who have self-selected into this. The other thing I like to do is go to in Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I'll go to my podcast and find the you might also like, right? So there's a few podcasts here you might also like. So Cold Call maybe is one. Um, Case studies. So I don't know if they do guests, but this gives me a lead for similar podcasts I could reach out to. Same thing with Spotify. I'm about to like out my playlist here. Hopefully it's nothing embarrassing. But you can search for your podcast, and then they list the about. I don't know if they actually list similar podcasts. It looks like they don't, but you could go to the category listing and then again look for other podcasts over here. So those 3 or those 2 really. Tink Media I think is the best, and then Apple Podcasts and Spotify are next. There is if Discord doesn't scare you, um, there is a podcast community from Ariel Nissenblatt. It looks like this link doesn't work anymore. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's hit its limit or something like that. But I'll do some research into that. But this podcast community is podcasters looking for people to collaborate with. Next up is I really like Podchaser. So Podchaser and Listen Notes are very similar to the directory searches, but again, if you search for your podcast, and if you, I guess I'll say here, right? If you don't have a podcast, look for podcasts in your niche. So like a podcast that maybe you like to listen to or searching for your term, right? Maybe your niche here, right? So if if you're I don't know, a little league coach, right? You can search for um podcasts that might have I just picked that one, but um the little league podcast, right? So you can look there, and then what I like to do is go to the similar tab here. Um and then it will give me podcasts similar to mine or a podcast I listen to in my niche, right? And so from here, I can try to find the contact information for the podcaster, right? So, and then the same thing with listen notes. Listen notes will do the same thing, where is that Buzz? Very nice. Where they will list my podcast, and then um they'll show lists, right? Places where my show is listed or curated lists, which again will list similar podcasts to the ones that talk about what I talk about, or maybe a similar audience, right? As far as finding the contact information, oops, as far as finding the contact information, this is why I like Tink Media is the best, right? Because they list that information right in the Airtable base. If you can't find that information, what I'll generally do is let's go back to this Little League podcast, right? So about the podcast, there are 3 episodes. If I pick one, it looks like um they don't have a presence online, right? So that makes it a little bit harder. And why am I not going back? Okay. Um, but let's search Little League podcast in Google. So it looks like this is leading me to other similar podcast, dedicated Little League podcast for kids. From here, I might send them a Twitter DM, right? If that's available. Visit our site. So I would go to their website and see if there's contact information, player spotlight, or so here I can send the information. Um, and then they also have their email address listed at the bottom here. So that's how I would go about finding the information. If I can't find it in the directory, I would go to their website, find contact information, and then reach out to them. And again, the anatomy of the podcast pitch um, should be something like, "Hi, do your research first of all, find out a little bit about the podcast and what they cover and who their target audience is. Then mention who you are, how you found their podcast, and what value you can bring to them. Hey, I noticed that you're a podcast that talks to little league coaches. I am a father of 3. I'm heavily involved in my kids' after school activities. I'd love to come on to talk about how I manage, how my wife and I manage being available to our kids and pushing them to be their best while not being too heavy-handed. If that's something that's interesting to you, I'd love to come on and talk to your audience more about that. My name is Joe Casabona, and then the bio information, right? If I was pitching this, my bio would be crafted towards that, right? Um, Online coach who helps busy dads or whatever. So, um, you should always put the value proposition first. So I think that's everything at this point. We've got the bad pitches, right? The people you don't want to be. We've had examples of good and bad pitches that I've actually gotten. Recently, I got a pitch that was AI, like it was definitely generated by AI. It was so very terrible. Um, and that is actually the thing that pushed me to finally publish the bad pitch archetypes, because I've had that for a while, um, but I never got around to publishing it. So thank you, random person, who used AI in your pitch. It was very bad. Um, and then we looked at good pitch examples, and then my outreach base. Now, if you let's see, I there is a way, um, very professional. There's a way to get my podcast swap database I really wish I had the link handy for you. Um, Actually, you know what? There's an opt-in on the links I shared, right? So grow with podcast swaps. You'll get my podcast swap template in Airtable and Google Sheets, and you'll also get some helpful templates and things like that. So um, there you go. That is everything I had prepared. I think I did just find the uh, guest outreach. Nope, that is the one to get people on my show. So I will try to find this template for you. Um, it's like in the annals of my opt-in freebies, and I will share it in this event as soon as I find it. So that's everything I have. Are there any questions from the group?
Hey, Joe. Thank you. Way to go. I'm impressed, first of all, with all of the great content you you shared and ideas and strategies and also resources to look into once people leave the live stream and can read some of these posts that you shared, but also that you did this with 2 kids in the room. Is that what's going on back there?
Well, one is very occupied with her iPad, so like
Okay.
1.5 kids. Shout out to my
It's
daughter. She
amazing.
was really, really helpful when Louis woke up from his nap and was very sad. So she is 6.
Oh,
I'm very
oh
proud of
my
her.
gosh. I'm
Yeah.
amazed. Well, I'm amazed. We're proud of you. So way to go.
Thanks.
That's fantastic. Um, I haven't seen any questions come in, but I loved all the things you're saying about the type of guest not to be. I think a lot of times when we're in that kind of um, mindset of I need to do this. I need to go get on podcasts. I'm just going to go hammer out a lot of proposals and just shoot them out all over the place, and then you get nothing back, right? So I love take some time, show how you can provide what value you bring, show that you care about that person's podcast, show that you appreciate it, why you think it's a good match for you, those sorts of things. I loved that. Um, and I also loved your friend's example that you shared. I had forgotten about that episode, and it made me all nostalgic. So
Thanks.
loved that. Um, not seeing any questions coming in. For those of you who are watching, or if you're watching the replay, remember that you can always post questions for Joe in the Digital Agency Owners Facebook group. He's in there, so you can go to this event and post questions in there. You can tag him in a comment, anything like that. You can email me, and I'll get questions for Joe. He'll be back again next month, so those questions that you have, feel free to bring them next month, and we'll be back again with another expert series on podcasting and automation. So yeah, you'll have a chance to ask those questions if you're tuning into the replay and didn't get a chance to ask them this time. So Joe, thank you so very much. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for working with me through sick kids. Hopefully
Oh
next
yeah,
month they'll be on the
I
mend. I
yes,
did drop in the chat. I found those templates. They're actually part of a Google Sheet. They're like the email templates Google Sheet tab. So um I have a couple of templates and then real examples in that Google Sheet. So
oh
um
awesome.
yeah, so that is the template that I send out when I'm pitching myself on podcasts, and that was written partially by my friend Brittany Lynn, who is a podcast booker. Yeah, like a podcast agent, a media agent. So
Awesome,
yeah,
fantastic.
so there you
And
go.
we'll make sure to share those in Facebook as well if you're watching there, because for some reason the restream chat does not
Oh, is
send it to the Facebook comments,
only posting to
um,
YouTube. Yeah, and yeah,
to YouTube.
that's also part of the opt-in if you want to get like the Airtable base and those templates. It'll get sent together as well.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Joe. Really appreciate it. Enjoy the snuggles with your little
Thanks.
one there. I'm sure he's enjoying them.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next month. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and we'll see you guys.